Scannable. Right now, I want to welcome to the program the Chief of Police for the Detroit Police Department. Chief James Craig is with us on the program. And, Chief, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, how you doing? How's everything?
I am great. It is great to have you on the program, sir.
Oh, great to be here. Great to be here.
Do you think you're going to have to hold another press conference to talk about this interview?
I probably will. I mean, people want to know. There's a lot of talk, a lot of chatter.
There is, and I have to say, I was fascinated by the local response to your cover on America's First Freedom Magazine, your Q&A with them. A lot of folks in Detroit were very curious why you would sit down and talk with the National Rifle Association.
Well, you know, the thing is, Detroiters, as I pointed in the articles, are just fed up with the whole violence, victims. And, you know, I'm excited that, you know, we have driven crime down significantly since after I got here, ending the year on a high note, and then the first quarter of the year, driving crime down. And so, but, you know, the culture of violence here is very different than places I've worked. And so, you know, we had a police department here that before I got here, there was depolicing going on and calls for service that were being held between shifts, 50-minute response time. And so I suppose Detroiters felt like, well, you know, who can we count on? Here we're being carjacked at gunpoint. We're being robbed, shot. And they felt like, you know, then they had the opportunity to get CPL's concealed pistol license, and they started to do it. I mean, my critics here would say, well, since I got here, I've certainly really created this environment of vigilantism, which is so untrue. They would say things that, well, there are more deadly force shootings by citizens or justifiable homicides. And I say, well, that's not true. It started before I got here. I just call it how I see it.
Absolutely. I mean, and I got to tell you, Chief, I remember an armed citizen story from before your time in Detroit. A carjacking victim right outside of Detroit Police Headquarters was a CPL.
Oh, yes, I know. In fact, I met him. He's a gun shop owner. We had a long talk. I had met him when I went to purchase a new weapon, and he was telling me about his incident right in front of 1300 Bobby in the old police headquarters.
Right. And you know, so, I mean, I remember that story distinctly because I thought to myself, well, boy, it's a good thing this guy had his firearm because, you know, even right outside of police headquarters, the police cannot be responsible for you and your safety at all times. And I know that law enforcement officers wish they could, but that's simply not a reality.
No, it's not a reality. And I've said publicly, I don't care if it's Los Angeles, a place I spent 28 years, Cincinnati, another place I was police chief. Police officers cannot be on every corner in front of every residence. It's just not realistic. And then when they're confronted with an armed suspect, you know, what do you say to the suspect? Hold on a minute, I need to call 911 so I can get the police responding. I mean, that's just not I mean, it sounds funny, but, you know, and I've said this is about an imminent threat to life. That's what I've said. And my critics would say, well, you know, you're creating this culture of violence. I said, well, let's change the conversation for a change. And I maintain that the conversation should focus squarely on criminals in possession of guns, not law-abiding, not good Detroiters who lawfully have CPLs. Because there's no problem when that CPL holder is confronted with an imminent threat to their life or facing great bodily injury or, you know, certainly loss of life to another, that they not take appropriate action. That's all I'm saying. I mean, that shouldn't be a surprise. And the thing here in Detroit, so many Detroiters, folks that live in Detroit, folks that live in the suburbs have applauded my position. And so not a problem. Again, the critics are small,
yeah,
I believe.
I keep seeing one organization quoted, and they're the only ones that keep getting quoted. You know, and let me talk specifically because you say that, you know, one of the things that the Detroit Coalition Against Police Brutality, I think is the name of the group, and they say that you're creating a culture of violence.
Ron Scott, he's my biggest critic, and you know, he also says I should find ways to develop jobs.
Right. Well, he
I said,
also
I'm
said,
all about employment. I said, but when have you heard of a law-abiding citizen? And I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying law-abiding citizens lose a job. They don't go out and start committing felonious assaults with a gun. They don't go out committing armed robberies. They don't go out and carjack at gunpoint. And I talk about the horrific stories that I have become aware of since my short tenure here in Detroit. I'm talking about an elderly woman in her home alone, beaten with a 2x4, robbed of her Social Security money, probably $70, and beaten some more. And so Mr. Scott has taken exception of me calling individuals like that violent predators. Well, a 90-year-old woman or the 74-year-old man who takes a daily walk and he's confronted by two armed suspects and he gets shot. I mean, what do we say to the victim? What do we say to their families?
heck, these two guys who attacked Paris Ainsworth a couple of Saturdays ago, Chief, she pulled into the driveway of her car and she saw these two guys walking up, and she said they didn't even give her a chance to say anything. They just shot at her, and thankfully she is a CPL holder, and she had her gun with her, and she was able to defend herself.
But then let's not forget about the recent incident, about the tragic beating of Mr. Utash, and a CPL holder, a retired nurse, went to his aid. She didn't come out in a flagrant manner, waving a gun. She went and rendered aid in the face of danger where a group of hoodlums was beating Mr. Utash, and she told him to back off. She didn't do it with her gun in hand. Now, she had her gun.
Right.
She admitted that. And she said, I would have resorted to using it if I felt there was going to be increased danger to Mr. Utash. There was going to be danger to my life or great bodily injury. I was going to use my gun, but she didn't. And so she was a responsible, law-abiding citizen that decided that she wanted to go to the aid of this man who was being beaten in the streets of Detroit. Now, I don't want to paint the picture that, that Detroit is so bad. I mean, I'm excited about the fact that Detroit is a city that's on the move, that's changing. The fact that we're sitting on a significant reduction in homicide. We're talking about a 29% reduction in homicide, 20% reduction in overall crime, not by accident. But I've also said publicly, and research is, it was some DOJ-funded research that showed that an armed citizen can or could have a deterrent effect on violent crime. To what degree, what percentage, I don't know. But suspects here know, they're streetwise. They know that there are a number of Detroiters who are lawful CPL holders, and they respond in a certain way. Because what I've seen here, which is kind of different than places I've been, some of the suspects are wearing vests, protective body armor, and some of them have directed the victims to disrobe because they're fearful that they could be shot by an armed citizen.
Chief, let me ask you, is there any chance of you changing your mind? Is there any chance of you deciding, boy, I'm tired of this criticism, I'm tired of the negative attention, I'm tired of Huffington Post calling me a poster boy for the NRA. I'm going to go out and
No, I'm consistent. Look, this is strictly about self-defense.
Yeah.
Those who are not vocal about it agree with me. I mean, Detroiters have been historically, the city has unfairly, in some instances, but historically been viewed as one of the more violent cities in America. And I think it was in 2006, 2007 when Detroiters had an opportunity to obtain concealed pistol licenses. They did so. This predates me. I talk about Second Amendment. I talk about self-defense. I didn't craft that law. I mean, I wasn't even born 200 years ago. I mean, the bottom line is this. Why would I change on an issue that talks about pro-life, if you will? Law-abiding citizens who are confronted with an imminent threat to life. It's just like our police officers. They don't wake up in the morning looking for a gunfight.
Right.
They just don't. They would prefer not to use deadly force. I would say the vast majority, if not all of our good Detroiters are not looking for a gunfight.
Absolutely. Any more than I'm hoping to use that fire extinguisher in my kitchen.
Exactly. I mean, we would hope in a perfect world that there would be no violence. But let's talk about criminals with guns. That's the issue. And so we, as part of our effort, our strategic approach to abating violent crime in this city, we go after the ex-felons who are in possession of guns. We go and identify the individuals who are illegally possessing weapons. And we're doing a great job of it. And so I know that's a contributing factor. We're sitting on year-to-date, phenomenal 33% reduction in robberies.
Wow.
33% in the city of Detroit. We're also sitting in a subcategory of street robbers. You know, Detroit is known for carjackings.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I was in L.A., there was a moment where, you know, the gang members were carjacking. That ended very quickly. But right now, year to date, we're sitting on a 17%, first time this year, the lowest ever, 17% reduction in carjacking incidents. And the majority of these carjackings are not just some individual coming up and demanding the car. They're usually armed suspects. They're violent, day, night. I can tell you a story of a CPL holder who saw a defenseless lone female dropping her son off to get some treats at a gas station. Armed suspect approaches, takes her car. A lawful CPL holder engaged the suspect, and it was a shootout. He got shot. Fortunately, he survived.
Yeah.
Fortunately, he survived. So, you know, this is about self-defense.
Absolutely. Let me ask you, Chief, and I appreciate your time. I know you're a busy guy. I don't want to keep you all afternoon, although I could talk to you for hours. You know, you came from L.A.
I did.
And we recently had the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals issue a decision in a case called Peruta that says, in essence, San Diego County, that's where the case was brought, but California law, the Ninth Circuit held, is violating people's right of self-defense because you can't openly carry a firearm for self-defense, and they don't issue permits for reasons of self-defense. Do you think it's time for that to change in California? Do you think California, L.A. needs to go shall issue like you have there in Michigan?
Well, I tell you, I'm a proponent of the shall issue. The thing I like about concealed weapons permits, and this is a distinction I make. First of all, you know, you submit for the permit. There's a background check, you know, so we're not giving permits to a felon. And certainly if we have information that someone is mentally disabled, we're not giving permits out to those individuals. And so then you go through a class. You go through some training. So what you're talking about is a law-abiding citizen who's well-trained, or at least trained, to handle the firearm safely, and when confronted with a situation, know when they can or cannot use deadly force. And so in my view, that's a more responsible way. And I think for me, the epiphany came, you know, I spent 28 years in Los Angeles. And the LAPD is a great policing organization. We've done great work in reducing crime in the city of Los Angeles, which is evident by their crime statistics.
Mm-hmm.
But then I go off to Maine, and, you know, I never forget the model of the state of Maine, the way life should be. And so as my first week as police chief, and I've told this story, and I think it was in your article, sitting there with a stack of concealed carry permits on my desk, probably a dozen. And I'm doing what I'm wired to do, deny. I must have denied a dozen or so permits until my staff started to run in the office. Hey, Chief, you may not know this, but Maine's a gun state, and we like our guns. And if you haven't noticed, we probably have some of the lowest crime in the country. And I started thinking about it. And I started thinking that, you know, and I've met a lot of great Mainers. I mean, people who are law-abiding, responsible, and it's true. Crime is low. And some might argue, well, it's Maine. Why wouldn't it be low? I mean, they had gang members in Maine.
Right.
Gang members who carried guns. But you know what I know? They didn't accost Mainers with guns because they knew one thing: there's the risk that they could be shot. They knew that, and I had to really think that that was a contributing factor, and not by accident. Crime in Maine is low. You know, it's only an hour and hour and a half from Boston, and so it's not some little unknown place. The crime was low, and so I changed at that point. That's when I started making the shift in my thinking. And certainly, again, this is not me saying go out, everyone, line up at your local gun store and get a gun. Because let's face it, everybody, the responsibility of a gun, we've heard the tragic stories of irresponsible gun owners, children being shot, accidental shootings. But you know, the one thing I said in the press conference the other day, because someone was really focusing on the self-defense position I was taking. And I said, so if someone takes an automobile and drives it in a reckless manner, and God forbid a dozen or so people are killed in the process, do we take cars from everyone? Or do we just look at the isolated incident? You know, the issue is simple. Criminals with guns drive violent crime, period. Law-abiding people, unemployed or not, are not out using guns. And, you know, there's research on some of this. And certainly, with 37 years in this business, now having worked in 4 different cities, I have a little bit of an opinion on what does work. And again, I'm not suggesting, this city is going through a major transformation. But I know that criminals know. There's 2 things I know they're concerned about: armed, law-abiding citizens and a police department that is efficient and effective in getting the job done.
Well, listen, Chief, I can't thank you enough for coming on the program this afternoon. It's been a real pleasure and an honor talking to you. I hope that we can do it again in the future. And again, thanks for everything you're doing.
Hey, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Chief James Craig joined us, Chief of the Detroit Police Department, here on NRA News, Cam and Company. After the break, Cameron, I want to go to Detroit. I really do. I want to do a show from Detroit.
I was thinking, it's funny. I really had the same thought because we're always thinking about cool places to do the show.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed the last time I was in Detroit. I know it has its problems, but just if nothing else, just to sit down with him, it's just so refreshing to have a big city police chief talk like he does.
Yep.
Like really the rest of America does, and most of America does and feels.
Absolutely. And, I got to tell you, listen, I would love to go and have Chief Craig on the program in person. But, for whatever reason, I've never been to Detroit. But I guess maybe it's the plucky underdog story, Cameron. Here is this city that has been mismanaged, has been run into the ground, and yet the people who live there love that city, and they want to save it. And they know that they can't save it the way it's been. They know that they have to remake it. And so there is real innovation and real entrepreneurship. In a sense, Detroit is a 21st century frontier. Where if you have, there was a story a couple of months ago, I think it was in the Daily Beast, guy bought a foreclosure house for a couple of $100 in a neighborhood. He moved in, he started fixing it up, became a gun owner. This left of center guy who decided to move to Detroit became a gun owner pretty quickly, and became very appreciative of his right of self-defense fairly quickly. But here he is. He's helping to not even really save a community, but rebuild a community. And we talk with Thomas LeDuc from FTR Radio on the program all the time. Fingers Malloy from Detroit as well. The people who come from Detroit are so passionate about it. They love that city. So I want to see for myself. Charlie LaDuff, gave up working for the New York Times to go work at the Detroit Free Press, I think it was, Detroit News, and then now at the Fox affiliate there in Detroit. There's something about a place like that makes people fight for it so hard. And that's the thing. We always say on this program that even in the worst of neighborhoods, there are more good people than bad. Detroit, I think, is the perfect evidence of this. Here you have a community that, has its share of bad folks, violent predators, as Chief Craig said. But they are outnumbered by the good folks. And when the good folks know that they can fight back, when the good folks, and I'm not just talking about being an armed citizen, I'm talking about fighting back, reclaiming your community. The ability to defend yourself is certainly a part of that, but it is only a part of it. When you feel like you got a fighting chance, you got more people who are willing to fight. So, yeah, we got to figure out a way to get to Detroit. I mean, I figure airplane would probably be the best way, but a reason, a specific reason and time and place to get to Detroit. When we come back after the break, Tabitha Hale from RARE will be with us. Andrew Langer next hour from the Institute for Liberty in studio talking about Operation Choke Point. We'll also talk about Operation Choke Point with Congressman Blaine Luetkemeyer from Missouri. So stick around. We've got much more NRA News Cam and Company for you coming up this afternoon.